Well, good evening, everybody, and welcome to Montgomery County Public Schools. My name is Thomas Taylor. I'm the District Superintendent of Schools, and tonight we are here to talk about our facilities strategy and our capital improvement plan. So I want to acknowledge a couple of things right out of the gate. Today is Indigenous Peoples Day, and this is a day of not just celebration, but also a day of reflection. And we're going to spend an awful lot of time today talking about properties that were once not owned by the school system, and that is worthy of its own reflection and worthy of some reverence and respect, and also to put into context some of our bigger picture. I also want to thank you for being here tonight and giving up precious family time to be a part of our conversation today, because we're going to be talking about some really big things that are going to weigh heavy on the school system for many years to come. So thank you for being a part of the conversation today. I also want to give a huge shout out to members of the Board of Education who are here today. Our President of the Board of Education, Julie Yang. Our Vice President of the Board of Education, Grace Rivera-Oven. Carla Silvestri, Brenda Wolf, Anuva Malou, Laura Stewart are here today. And we're also joined by a member of our County Council, the Chair of the Education and Culture Committee, Will Jawando. Thank you for being here. We also have in the audience a number of folks, whether you're joining us online or you're joining us in person. We have a number of folks who are representing different organizations who support MCPS. We have different staff members, and we even have representatives of our county government who are here to support. So thank you for being here. It really does mean a lot. And I also want to thank our community members who are engaged in tonight's conversation and for your advocacy on behalf of MCPS. It really does make a huge difference. And it is going to take a lot of collective advocacy from us as a community to carve a path forward and have a shared vision about what happens next. And so let's jump right in. We have a serious problem, and it's a big problem. Our circumstances have changed recently, which are going to cause us to shift our strategy. In order to get to that shifted strategy and to talk about our capital improvement plan, I do want to go back in time and talk a little bit about our history. I want to talk about some of the hard truths that shaped our experience and where we are today, and some of the strategies that we put into play. And I promise you I will reserve judgment, because some of those strategies were very effective for the time, even though they may not be effective now. And I also want to talk about new strategies that we should be putting into play and recommendations that I'm making to the Board of Education. Tonight is a kickoff event. It is the beginning of the capital improvement season for the Board of Education. Tomorrow there's a work session that the Board of Education will dive into this information in much more greater detail than what I present tonight. Tonight is really more on the executive summary side, but I want to be able to provide as much information, at least at a high level, to you so that we can begin the conversation and do that in earnest tomorrow. So I also want to align us to our strategic plan. Last spring, the Board of Education adopted a very robust and ambitious strategic plan, and one of those goals focused on making sure that we have the absolute best, safest, welcoming, and inclusive learning environments for our kids to learn in and for our staff to work in. At the center of the work and the recommendations that I am making today and throughout this CIP season are really about how we can create that safe, welcoming, and inclusive learning environment. And so I'm going to invite a friend to join us. And that friend who's going to join us, I'd like you to meet Caution the Canary. So anytime that you see Caution pop up in the corner of your screen, you should be a little nervous, because it usually means that there's hard truths coming. And there's going to be difficult parts of this conversation, or else Caution wouldn't be there. And I will say that Caution the Canary and having live canaries in the boardroom was vetoed. I was hopeful for that, but no such luck this time. Hopefully we'll do a little bit better than broccoli, like we did in our operating budget. but we're delighted to have caution on the screen nonetheless. I also want to develop some shared understandings about what we're actually talking about. When we're talking about our capital improvements plan, we're largely talking about the portfolio of schools and buildings that the school system oversees and supervises. And for us, it's a pretty big portfolio. We supervise 238 buildings. Not all of them are schools, some of them are offices, some of them are holding schools, some of them are specialty schools, but it's a pretty big portfolio of things to supervise. But this is a really important number to keep in the back of our minds, because a lot of the math problems that we're going to review tonight center around servicing the 238 buildings that we have. Another shared understanding that I want to make crystal clear is that when we're talking about buildings, we're talking about assets, and we're talking about the things inside those buildings, whether they be tables and chairs, whether they be plumbing systems or electrical systems, whether they be roofs, or whether they be HVAC systems. They are assets, and every single one of those assets has a lifespan, a useful life. And so planning for the lifespan of a facility does matter, and some have different lifespans. Like, for instance, paint on a wall in a schoolhouse that gets a lot of use all the time doesn't have a very long useful life. And school buildings themselves, made of brick and mortar, do have a longer useful life. It's not forever, by the way, and it certainly isn't 100 years. That's going to come up tonight. But we do have some assets that have varying lengths of time, and then they expire. They're no longer useful. And so it's critical for us to think about these assets and plan for when these assets are going to fulfill their useful life. And we need to have the resources to replace them when they do exhaust their useful life. So, here we go. Caution the Canary makes his second appearance, or her second appearance. And here we are with our first hard truth of the evening. Our facility condition is, in fact, declining. And the sad part about this is that it's not just declining, but it's getting worse and worse and worse every year, because the gap in the resources we have to fill is continuing to widen each year. And so I want to unpack this a little bit with you. Much has been made about HVAC and MCPS. We heard a lot about this actually in the news this school year. We hear about it every year in the summer months. We hear about it every year in the fall. We hear about it sometimes in the spring. We even occasionally hear about it in the winter when we're trying to heat our buildings. And sometimes there's even social media that kind of surrounds some of this. And I'm going to tell you that this is one of the biggest pain points that we experience with our facilities. It's such a big pain point that we are actually $740 million behind in HVAC projects. And more than 40 of our HVAC systems is not functioning properly. So it's no surprise that this is an issue that keeps occurring with some regularity. And of course, when your HVAC system is not working properly and it is humid outside and it is hot outside and it's not working properly, what do you typically end up getting as a result? This is the audience participation part. Mold, of course. You end up getting mold. And we've had our fair share of mold in MCPS this year. Sadly, none of this is a surprise. It's not a surprise because the maintenance of our HVAC systems over time has slipped and that gap has widened. It is an impetus for us to make correction and for us to make change, but we have to call it out and we have to identify what that it's actually tied to. So let's do a little bit of math. I'm going to take you to the chalkboard. Granted, I was a social studies teacher, but I can still do some math and I love math. So here we go. We've got 238 buildings. The average useful life of an HVAC system is approximately 20 years when things are good, most of the time. And that should mean that we should be replacing 12 HVAC systems a year. And for those who are super nitpicky and technical, we should be replacing 11.9 systems a year. Hopefully that's none of you today, and we're going to go with 12. So if we were going to replace 12 HVAC systems a year, this is probably what it would look like. It would look like 7 elementary systems at around $7.5 million a pop. It would look like 2 middle school systems at $14 million a pop. And it would look like 1 high school system at $35 million a pop. We'd also probably do a couple of our other outlying buildings at a bargain basement price of around $5.5 million a pop, for a total of $127 million every year that we should spend just on HVAC, just to maintain. Now, it's important to talk about this number for a reason, because over the past several years, we've only had around $300 million a year for capital projects. And what this is saying is that we would spend almost half of it just on HVAC. Well, I got to tell you, there's more in our capital improvement plan than HVAC. We have replacement schools, we have roofs that we have to fix, we have windows that we have to fix, plumbing systems that we have to fix, electrical systems that we have to fix. All of that crowds out that $300 million a year pretty quickly. Right now, I can tell you the reason that we have only done 5 HVAC replacements a year is really, really simple. We've run out of money. We should be doing 12. We've only been doing 5. Does that kind of explain our issues and where we are today? You betcha. So that's not the only issue that we're contending with. Another really significant issue that we have is that we have schools that have reached the end of their useful life. And so this has become a fairly significant issue, not just in Montgomery County, but across the state and across the nation. So much so that having 7 elementary schools that are past their useful life is not a surprise to anyone. But the scary number is actually the 82 schools that are nearing the end of their useful life, and the planning that is required to prepare for either renovation, renewal, or replacement down the road. And that's a really big number. Similarly, at the secondary level, having 6 schools that are past their useful life is not a surprise to anybody, but the 31 schools that are right behind it that threaten what the future looks like for our facilities, we need to start planning yesterday to make sure that we get ahead of this, because it is so significant. So now let's take our 238 buildings, divide by a useful life of 50 years. If you want to stretch that and be super generous and go 60 years, that's fine with me too. The results don't change all that much, but it looks like we need to replace a minimum of 4 to 5 schools a year because they have exhausted their useful life. That's a pretty expensive proposition. And let's talk about how expensive that can be. If we're looking at elementary schools specifically, we should be doing at least 6 elementary school projects, not just replacements, but renovations too, maybe some renewals, but at least 6 projects to keep up with the pace of our existing portfolio, to the tune of between $200 and $345 million a year. Remember that $300 million that we spend each year on CIP? Gone, just like that, just in one item. How about middle schools? If we just did 2 a year, which is what we should be doing, a couple of projects a year in middle school, that's between $135 million and $210 million a year. High schools, price tag starts to go up a little bit. We've got some big square footage here, over 250,000 square feet in a high school. Pretty significant dollar signs attached to this if we did just 1 high school project a year, depending on what it was, whether it was a renovation, a renewal, or a replacement. It's between $145 and $226 million a year. I'm going to throw in one more big caveat. That's in today's dollars. The cost goes up every year. And that's also a problem that we've experienced, is that we haven't taken into consideration inflationary issues and cost escalation over time. And so what it looks like is MCPS keeps coming back to the trough every year and begging County Council for more when the calculations weren't taking into consideration all the important factors. This has also made the news recently, is our headquarters space. The Carver Educational Services Center, which houses a huge portion of our instructional support arm. This is just one of our many instructional support buildings that we use in the school system. And I gotta tell you, it's seen better days. It is a building that is pushing the century mark and needs a lot of support. The problem with a building this old is that the building materials that were used to build this building are not building materials that we would use today. And in order to do any type of project in this space would require a level of cost that would make us all a little uncomfortable. Interestingly enough, this is not even the worst of our infrastructure buildings. Take one good look at our warehouse facility, and don't worry, we'll spend more time with our warehouse facility. But the warehouse has seen better days. The warehouse was constructed using recycled materials from the World War II era. And it has this as one of the walls. So we have a lot of infrastructure work that has been left and has been ignored. So we'll spend a little bit of time unpacking this a little bit later in the evening, but it is noteworthy to say that every year that we've delayed or deferred one of our infrastructure projects, the only thing that has happened is that cost has escalated as a result. So I bring you one of our old MCPS strategies. Now, contrary to popular belief, this is actually not me. This is an image that I took off the internet. I do not know who this poor soul was, but burying our head in the sand and kicking the can down the road to next year has been one of our old strategies. Oh, that's a very meaningful project. We'll get to it next year. Oh, you need to get that roof replaced? We'll get to it next year. HVAC is not working? We'll get to it next year. This has not been an effective strategy for us. Don't believe me? Well, let's ask Brooke. We have the benefit of an outstanding comptroller for the state of Maryland. Brooke Learman recently published a report. There are copies that are out in the audience right now. And her report talks about the facility condition for the entire state of Maryland. And I gotta tell you, it doesn't look pretty, although Montgomery County is just slightly better than the rest of the state, but not by much. According to Comptroller Learman, the comptroller says that 80% of schools in the state of Maryland need dramatic repairs or are unserviceable. And that's terrible. Well, good news for Montgomery County, it's only 75% that are in that condition. Yikes. One of the compounding factors that has been influencing this is that 42% cost escalation over the last 6 years has not helped us. When construction costs have skyrocketed through the pandemic into today and inflationary factors have kind of hit an all-time high, I gotta tell you, to do school construction in a meaningful way comes at a huge cost. This has been coupled with a really high cost of capital as compared to even 5 years ago. So even the cost to borrow and to take out a debt service have really escalated. This has created a perfect storm for us. And you know, I will say this, it's not the fault of any funding partner. It really isn't. These are economic conditions that have created an adverse environment for us. And even though we have an adverse environment, it doesn't absolve us of the responsibility to try and find a solution. And that's really what we need to do moving forward, is work together to find solutions. There's our friend again. She's back. Caution the Canary is back to warn us that the math isn't mathing. So I want to brace you, because what I'm about to show you, I'm going to pass out in a large format spreadsheet. And if you know anything about my operating budget, Thomas Taylor loves a large format spreadsheet. And I've made it big so that you can see it and you don't need reading glasses. And on one side of this large format spreadsheet is the hard truth, what it actually costs to fulfill the school system and to keep us on pace and to get to that equilibrium point. I gotta tell you, it's a big number. It's a scary number. On the back is what we're actually proposing. And I promise you that it is still a big number, but it is not the number that is as big as what we need to do, because part of our strategy moving forward needs to take incremental steps over time to get us to the place of equilibrium. We are not going to solve the world's problems in one CIP, or even 2 CIPs, or even 10 CIPs. It took us 2 decades to get into this mess. It is going to take us 2 decades to get out of this mess. It is going to take time and patience. Caveats fully explained. Now are we ready? Very good. So the actual CIP and what we've been funded at for the past year is about $1.8 billion in terms of our current funding level. What we should do to get us to that point of staying on pace and to get us to that point of equilibrium, we should be investing $5.2 billion over 6 years. Now, I'm just going to tell you right now, that's a huge sum of money. We will not do this overnight. We wouldn't even recommend doing this overnight. This will take time. But what I recommend is that we take a very ambitious step to move forward. Now, a lot of people will look at a problem like this and wait for the perfect time. And I got to tell you, there is no such thing as the perfect time. The perfect time to start is starting. Starting is the perfect time, because these problems will only get bigger over time, and our effort to correct them needs to begin today. So, the next hard truth, our enrollment is declining. And I got to tell you, this is an uncomfortable conversation for Montgomery County, because this has not been our experience for much of the past few decades. And I want to take a look at kind of the history of what kind of got us to this point. So on the maps on the screen in the upper left-hand corner is what our population density and housing density looked like in 1950. And it takes us all the way up to 1990. And just real quickly, I want to show you what it looks like today in 2024, so a year removed from today. And I got to tell you, we filled out pretty strongly. So again, back to the 1950s, 60s, and 70s to today. We've added a lot of housing, and we've added a lot of people, and we've grown very fast. But something else has changed. The percentage of households that have children has dramatically reduced. Now, here's what I'm going to tell you. Everybody benefits from a strong school system. They do. Now, when you want to make sure that you have emergency services with EMTs who are well-trained and well-prepared, they came from a great school system. When you have professional services that are provided in your community, they came from kids who graduated from a great school system in our community. Everybody benefits when we have a strong school system, whether they're 60% of the households that have children in them or just over 30% that have children in them. But this is an important inflection point, because it's a reflection of how Montgomery County has changed in addition to its population density growth, and something that we'll come back and revisit. Something else that's changed. We've seen a sharp decrease in student enrollment. Most recently, we are down 2,600 students from last year. This is significant. Now, there's a number of things that helped us to forecast our current status. The first thing is kindergarten enrollment is down. That's significant. But something else has changed recently that's worth pointing out. Our international enrollments are also sharply down. This is a big hit to our community, and it's something that we need to be attentive to, because it has a ripple effect that will influence the decisions that we make moving forward. We are also projected to go down over the next several years. During the term of this CIP, we will be reducing our student enrollment each year. This will have an impact on operations. This will have an impact on our facilities. So taking a look at an old strategy, what we used to do is chase capacity, because we were growing and it made a ton of sense. And then we had like a little bubble in the 70s and the 80s that we kind of declined in enrollment a little bit, and we cut some of our facilities. What this map shows is the total number of facilities measured against our population growth. And then we started to climb again into the 90s and 2000s, and here we are right at our peak in 2019. And here we are today, we're kind of leveled off and about to go down. Well, this was an effective strategy for the time. But what happened during this time is we were neglecting things like infrastructure, we were neglecting things like replacement cycles, and we were more attentive to chasing how many seats we could get into a school. So here's our friend again. Welcome back, Caution the Canary. Even though enrollment is dropping, it doesn't change the size of our portfolio. We still have 238 buildings that we need to manage, and we still have needs that are going unfulfilled. And I'm going to give you a really important example. One of the most pressing issues right now in the state of Maryland is our investment in early childhood education and making sure that we have seats and capacity for early childhood education. So even if our K through 12 enrollment goes down, that capacity still has a high value to us and still has an investment space for us, and it is still something that we need to be attentive to. So here's hard truth number 3. There isn't enough money to keep pace. Now, I know that this may seem inherent, and everybody says, yeah, you keep asking for money every year, and of course there's not enough money. But the problem that we're experiencing right now is that the gap continues to get wider because we are so far off of what would keep us on pace with maintaining our existing portfolio. So I want to explain something that's a little bit hard for some of our community to get their head wrapped around, and it's important to talk about for a second, because there are what seems like competing ideologies when in reality, this is just how the process works. And so, for example, tonight, it is my responsibility to present to the Board of Education what our needs are, okay? And our needs may exceed what our ability is to pay for those needs. It still does not absolve me of the responsibility to present those needs. I fully recognize and appreciate that our county government has limitations, and they do. As a matter of fact, as part of county business, there are spending affordability guidelines that are set by economic conditions that they don't have a ton of say over or control over, okay? It is not any one county council member's fault or county council or county government's fault where they set spending affordability because of how that system is set up. Do I wish that it was more focused on needs? Of course I do. But the reality is that we have to find the balance and working together to prioritize what projects can get accomplished within our grasp and our needs. And it is just that simple. Which brings us to old strategy number 3. Now, I've mentioned this before, but it is worth repeating that in kicking the can down the road on infrastructure projects, we have made a conscious choice to support school-based projects. And I'm going to tell you that this is actually a pretty great strategy for the most part. It really is. Our business is what happens in the schoolhouse. We need to be invested in creating learning environments that are fantastic. We really do. That's what our focus needs to be. Unfortunately, you can't do that every year and still run the school system efficiently. You have to invest in infrastructure, at least at some interval points, so that you can keep and maintain a modicum of efficiency in the school system. And we'll talk about what some of those projects look like. Another strategy, and this also explains the treats that you have at your desk. We have been operating as a school system on chewing gum and duct tape, and a strategy that has been called sprinkling. And let me describe what sprinkling is. Sprinkling is authorizing smaller projects in a wider array versus completing larger projects that are full and complete. A good example of sprinkling might be an addition to a building coupled with an addition to that addition, coupled to an addition to that addition. And you may wonder, do we have buildings that are like that? Well, I went to high school in one of those buildings, and since then has been renovated the proper way, and they did a really nice job. But the reality of that original building is that it was added on to bit by bit, and none of those additions were seamless, and none of them added value to the actual building itself and actually made the facilities maintenance more complex and more challenging over time because of the sprinkled projects that were not really strategic or well thought out. So this is an impetus for us to revisit what smaller fixes and the damage that that could do to a bigger picture. It also means that we need to widen our aperture on how we look at our CIP to wider than just 6 years, because we have to consider a much longer time horizon to what we are trying to accomplish as a school system in terms of our maintenance of our facility. The last little old strategy that we've been using is that we haven't invested in our capital improvement plan and our capital improvement needs at the rate in which to keep up with inflationary factors and the rate in which to keep up with the growing cost of construction. As a matter of fact, we've actually divested, until just this past year, we've actually divested in capital improvements, which has actually made that even sharper because of a sharper downturn because of those inflationary costs and because of those changes to construction costs, which has made it even worse. The hard reality and the hard truth that we have to deal with is that our needs really reflect about $5.2 billion worth of needs in a 6-year CIP. The reality is that we are unlikely to capture that immediately, doggone near impossible, but we do need to set a plan on how we might achieve that over time and what would bring us up to equilibrium. Now, this is important from a language standpoint. When I'm talking about equilibrium, I mean on pace with regular maintenance and regular corrections, renovations, renewals, and replacements. So what we've clearly been doing hasn't been working, and so it's time for us to shift our strategy to align with the circumstances that we're in today and to work with our partners to fix our problems. So I've got to ask, and here's my, my shovel example for today. What on earth is the first rule of holes? Stop digging. Absolutely. Well, I'm sad to say that even under the best of circumstances, we're not going to be at a level where we can stop digging, but we can slow the rate in which we are digging ourselves into a hole and make it less wide each year. And that really is the kind of incremental change that we need to make. So I've got a handful of strategies that I want to outline for you, and then I'm going to talk about projects, and then I'm going to send you on your merry way to make sure that you can make it for kickoff tonight. The first strategy that I want to highlight for you is one we've already talked about, which is climbing the ladder. Now, don't worry, I'm not going to climb this ladder. One, because I'm pretty sure I lack the certifications necessary to do this. And two, I'm pretty sure that the workman's comp claim for when I fall might not be what the board wanted to come out of tonight's event anyway. But this is really about growing our investment over time so that we can get to that equilibrium point. The second strategy, hold the sprinkles. We need to be doing whole projects, not projects in part. The third strategy has to do with data. We have to rely on independent third-party assessments and analyses of our facility condition in order to plan in a fair, equitable, and transparent way. We do have to invest in infrastructure. Don't get me wrong, I would love to punt on infrastructure because the school projects are impactful for the kids, but the reality is that the infrastructure projects are also impactful for the kids. They're impactful for our workforce who serve our kids and our teachers in a meaningful way, and we can't ignore them anymore. Something that we don't spend an awful lot of time talking about in the capital improvement plan is our bottlenecks and talking about things like holding schools. We would love to do certain projects, but sometimes we need to have a location to put the kids so that we can do the projects. So we have to make some investments in earnest in making sure that we reduce those bottlenecks and that we manage those bottlenecks in really efficient ways. And the last one is probably the least Montgomery County thing that I can say. We need to be a little bit modest with our school construction. And we need to build our projects on time, under budget, and we need to probably pull back some of the nice-to-haves in favor of the must-haves. So with that, I want to show you a little bit about what this looks like. We're not going to get to the promised land immediately. We're not even going to get there in 5 years or 10 years. This is really a 20-year CIP project that we need to commit and be disciplined for the next 20 years to get to a place where we are on pace and replacing our assets in a clear and logical way. Our second example of holding the sprinkles looks like this. Last year, we had a project in the CIP. It was for Highland View Elementary School. We were going to do an addition. I got to tell you, that addition was not going to add a ton of value. It would have been great. There would have been a new part of the building, but it would have been eclipsed by the old part of the building that wasn't touched. What we really need to do is we need to replace the building. And so if this is important, we need to commit to the things that are important and do whole projects and not things that are in piece. I'm going to come back to Sims in a little bit and talk about what the ramifications of that project are too, because it's definitely germane to our bigger strategy. The Board of Education has already reviewed this along with some of our community about how we might measure our facility condition against our use to create a list of prioritization and to rank some of our projects in a clear, consistent, and transparent way. Now, what I will say, and I'll mention this again, is that this should generate a list that is movable, that it has moving parts that change from year to year, that there is no queue where you get to be slot number 11 and then you're slot number 11 until you become. No, because your facility condition will change from year to year, and so this needs to be evaluated from year to year. Number 4, and this is a big one, is the investment in infrastructure. We talked a little bit about the Carver Educational Services Center, but we have other buildings as well. One of the major inconveniences of our community is that there is no one-stop shopping in MCPS, that a lot of our community needs are not fulfilled in one location of centralized services. Now, the whole point of having centralized services is so that you can capture economies of scope and scale. You can't do that when you're in 6 different places. It is a real limitation of our school system, or when the facility isn't working and everybody has to telework because the facility isn't working. That's a huge issue. We can't ignore it. CESC has been in the CIP before, and it's been taken out, and then it goes back in, and it gets taken out. We actually need to commit to solving that problem on a large scale. Looking at our warehouse conditions, and I am so excited to welcome our community to join me next Tuesday, October 21st, at our warehouse so that you can come and see for yourself our warehouse conditions. We'll take a tour of the warehouse. We'll talk about our facilities so you can get to see what we have going on. But needless to say, our worst conditioned school pales in comparison to the conditions in our warehouse facility. This is something that needs to be addressed with urgency and needs to be addressed for the safety of the people who are working there. We also have a really significant issue in terms of our transportation and regional services that we offer. I got to tell you, there is no parking lot in Montgomery County that is big enough for all the buses in Montgomery County. Nor would we want there to be, but the reality is that to reduce deadhead miles and to be efficient, we need to park buses in various locations. We need to provide services in various locations where people can easily access them. This is an idea that is not new, so much so that even our own county government has regional services centers because they know that not all of our community can access a central point to receive help. We have a map here of our existing regional services center. We're going to put this presentation online so you can take a look. But we have some thoughts on where we might revise some of those locations to better serve our community in different regions within our community. And you thought that regions were just about academic programs. No, it's a bigger picture for sure. Something that we don't spend an awful lot of time talking about is how we manage our bottlenecks and supporting some of our projects through holding schools. The safest way to deliver a construction project is to take kids off of the construction site and to move them to another facility where construction isn't happening. We have traditionally done that through holding schools, except that we got a big problem. We don't have any secondary holding schools at the moment, and we need to consider the impact of what that looks like. Because as much as we would love to tackle some of the big pieces of our capital improvement needs, like refurbishing Wooten High School or Magruder High School, it is impossible to do that when the kids are in the building. And so having some type of holding school to fulfill that need will make those projects possible. And so I know that there's advocacy and I know that there's interest behind projects like that. And I got to tell you that this is one of the bottlenecks that prevents those projects from taking place. Which brings me to our existing holding schools, which is very few, and they're all elementary schools. So I want to talk a little bit about SIMS. Now you may be wondering, if you don't speak MCPS, SIMS stands for Silver Spring International Middle School. And the condition of Silver Spring International Middle School is not great. It needs a lot of work. It needs a lot of help. It needs a lot of help in the short term. It needs a lot of help in the long term. Its location is not awesome. It is the site of the former Blair High School. Now, follow me along with this logic. We took the kids out of Blair High School. We built them a new school because the old Blair High School wasn't fit for having children in it. And then we went and put children in it. Probably wasn't the best move, but that was a decision made 20 years ago. And so we need to look at that facility and how that facility can best serve the community in a meaningful way. There's another problem that community has. We're all very sensitive and aware of some of the pedestrian safety issues in our community, and having the purple line right in front of that school adds a degree of complexity that really challenges us in our ability to provide a safe and welcoming learning environment. That is probably not a great location for an ongoing and existing school. But it is probably a decent location for a holding school. So one of the proposals in this capital improvement plan is to create the Silver Spring International Middle School site as a holding school for the secondary school space. So looking ahead to the future, we need to consider a lot of potential secondary sites. Even though they're not in this CIP, we are looking at Avery Road, we're looking at the Broome site, we're looking at Waring Station as potential other future sites for holding schools, because this is a real choke point in our ability to deliver projects on time and in the right space. And so we do need a lot of options, and right now we don't have those options. In this CIP, though, what we have included is the Silver Spring International Middle School site, or the old Blair High School site, as a potential holding school for the future. The last strategy that I want to highlight is modesty. Now, don't get me wrong, we build beautiful schools in MCPS, we really do. These are palaces to learning because they should be palaces to learning. But we could make different choices that could save us a lot of money. We're paying a significant premium for some of our projects that we could reduce that premium and create enough savings to do other projects. And so a little bit of give here would go a long way in terms of long-term sustainability and our ability to expand our efforts without adding more dollars to the taxpayers. And so this efficient use of dollars, this efficient approach to looking at how we might construct schools in the future really needs to be in our repertoire and our strategy moving forward. So this is a good inflection point to talk about what's actually in the capital improvement plan recommendation that's going to the Board of Education tomorrow. and to talk about some of the big school projects that are a part of this plan. And right at the top of the list, and you'll see that this list, as I mentioned before, does change over time as facility condition changes. You'll see some schools that we've spent an awful lot of time talking about in the past and where they end up landing in the recommendation today. And so at the top of the list is Eastern Middle School and a planned replacement for Eastern Middle School. We also want to add capacity to absorb a portion of the Silver Spring International Middle School community. We have a very high facility condition index of depleted value, and they are sitting at the top of our ranked order. Closely followed behind that is Piney Branch Elementary School's replacement. And you'll see that this very significant investment in the Silver Spring community is not without any surprises. These are facilities that have long gone without, and they show it walking the halls of these buildings, as do many of our buildings. As a matter of fact, 75% of them show it. Burning Tree Elementary School's replacement is also in our recommended capital improvement plan, as is Cold Spring Elementary School's replacement. Cold Spring is our last open concept school in Montgomery County. We are also, as I mentioned earlier, going to add Highland View as a full replacement and not just as an addition in the CIP. We are also adding Damascus High School. The benefit of Damascus High School is they have a property that's large enough that we can do a replacement on site. This is a great opportunity to add some capacity to this facility. This is already a part of our boundary study conversation, and this definitely dovetails with a broader conversation of how we can really enhance that community's footprint in that school. And it is one of the oldest schools in Montgomery County, and it definitely needs the help. Also a part of this proposal is Sligo Middle School doing an addition and a renovation. Now, I will tell you that this project was not at the top of the list, but adding capacity to Sligo does meet some of the objectives that we have outlined in our boundary study, as well as the proposal to move Sims to a holding facility. So as a consequence of that, we want to make sure that our kids are going to great learning environments, and this is a great opportunity to enhance that footprint. There is another school that is co-located at the Sims campus, or the old Blair campus, and that is Sligo Creek Elementary School. And it's time for Sligo Creek Elementary School to find a permanent location that is not co-located with another school in a very dangerous area. So we are looking at lots of different dimensions in terms of our school projects, and where we can add value to the community by enhancing the portfolio, and this is where we are today. So what this looks like is that a lot of things are happening in the fall of 2031, and that we're queued up for a lot of work over the next several years as we build up into this. But as you can see, the focus is on having these long-lasting corrections to issues with our facilities that have been long-standing. So there are some projects that are coming off of the CIP. With projects that are going on, inevitably when we reevaluate the list, as we will become common practice from this point moving forward, the list will change based on the facility condition. Now, when we do a project at a school, it may improve the facility condition, and that may change the status of that school and where it stands on the list. And at the top is Damascus Elementary School, which, because of a lot of work that has gone into the school, we have improved the facility condition. Now, I will say this, there's more work to be done. We have a major ADA project that we are queuing up for this year, which will also enhance the facility condition at Damascus. This is a school that does need a lot of love and need a lot of support, but when compared to some of the other projects on this list, it does not rise to the top like some of the other projects. Right ahead of Damascus is actually Twin Brook Elementary School, which actually has a higher facility index depleted value, and Whetstone. These are schools that do need support. They need ongoing projects on a wide array of issues. We will continue to work on those projects. We will continue to service these schools, even if they're not on a schedule for replacement. These are still schools that we are focused on and that we'll continue to address. Now, as I mentioned earlier, and I'm going to wrap things up really quickly here and just say, there's a lot of schools that should be on this list, a lot. But we have limited resources. And given that we have limited resources, there's a narrow set of things that we can focus on within the dollars that we have already stretched very, very far. The projects that we would add to this list if we had proper funding and the funding at the levels of maintenance would be several elementary school projects, 9 of them as a matter of fact, most of which would be renovations, and several secondary projects. And no surprise, there are some big ones. Benjamin Banneker Middle School, Magruder High School, Wooten High School. These are huge projects that need to take place. We need to keep an eye on them, and we need to continue to correct issues that are going on in their buildings because they need to be a part of the conversation moving forward, and they need to be a consideration moving forward. We also have major infrastructure projects that need to be a part of the conversation, and I'm just going to quickly go through this because the type is very small. You have a QR code so that you can see where to get this information because if you take a look at our capital improvements program budget, it is a very thick document. And so trying to find all of this in one spot, we did our best to kind of distill this. But HVAC is a big part of the conversation. You can see a ton of HVAC projects that need to take place. Roof replacements, athletics and outdoor play, fire safety upgrades, our PLAR budget for sure, our planned life cycle asset replacement cycle. This is the little bit of the smaller stuff. The emergency replacements, our restroom renovations, which need to take place. Our BIMPI budget, these are the building modification and program improvements. These are really significant projects that need to take place and have a huge impact. ADA projects to make sure that those with disabilities can access our schools across the board. Where this puts us is a whole series of events over the next month where we'll be talking with our community and hopefully hearing from you about how we can make improvements moving forward, the things that you see in this plan and this strategy that you identify with and support, and the things that you would suggest. It's all a part of that process. And this begins tomorrow. The board will engage with a work session tomorrow midday, followed by a couple of listening sessions that I'm hosting next week, one at our warehouse, the other one virtually, followed by some public hearing opportunities with the Board of Education and some work sessions, and ultimately a preliminary vote on the CIP before it goes into the budget process and is voted on finally in the spring. So there's a lot to do, and it's a busy time, but this is a great time to engage with the school system to talk about our facilities' future together. I just want to highlight a couple of things as I close out, and thank you again for your time and attention. This is a big ask. It's a big ask because our needs are really significant, and the gap continues to get wider and wider every year. In addition to the features that you see highlighted, I want to point out one in particular, and it's the last one, is that we know that there are other actions associated with this capital improvement program that need to also accompany this capital improvement program to balance capacity. We have some schools that are very, very big at the elementary level that are not balanced. And don't get me wrong, a bigger school means a lot of opportunities a lot of the time, but when that size stretches the ability for that school to do what it needs to do, it's a problem. And when that doesn't take into consideration future growth potential and movements that we're already seeing in our community for growth in one area but also decline in other areas, we're not smartly using our resources. And so one of the things that accompanies this recommendation to the Board of Education is also a request to adjust elementary boundaries, to deal with split articulation, to address some of the capacity needs, both forecasted and reality for today. And we know that this is a critical part of the process of how we utilize our facilities well. So with that, I want to thank you all again for coming. There'll be lots of times to engage with our hard truths and to talk about our new strategies and things that we're recommending for this Board of Education. And I hope you all have a lovely evening, and thank you all again so much for being here. As your parting gift.